My sister demanded I cancel my trip to watch her kids. I said, I'm done being your free babysitter. So I moved out, stopped paying their bills, and now them. Fresh out of college with my business degree, I found myself back in my childhood home. I'm Anna, 22, and honestly, I hadn't planned on moving back in with my parents, but here I was. The job hunt didn't take long, thankfully. Within a week, I landed a position at Davidson Marketing with a decent salary and promising performance bonuses. That night, over Mom's meatloaf dinner, I share my good news. I figure I'd stay for 3 months, save some money, then get my own apartment. The clinking of forks against plates stopped abruptly. Mom and Dad exchanged one of their looks, the kind that always spelled trouble. Moving out, Mom set down her fork. Anna, you know I can only work part-time at the library with my back problems? Dad cleared his throat. And things aren't great at the factory. There's been talk of layoffs. We could really use your help with the bills, Mom added softly. And you wouldn't have to pay rent here. It just makes more sense, don't you think? I stared at my half-eaten meatloaf, feeling trapped. They were right, in a way, and they were my parents after all. I guess I could stay a bit longer. Life fell into a routine after that. Go to work, come home, pay the bills, and Mom made sure dinner was always on the table. It seemed fine, manageable even, until last weekend when my sister, Jessica, showed up with her husband, David, and their kids, Olivia and Eisen. The shift in my parents was like someone had flipped a switch. Oh, my precious angels. Mom cooed, scooping up 4-year-old Olivia while Dad hoisted Eisen onto his shoulders. Jessica, honey, you look wonderful. How's everything? Tell us all about what you've been doing. I stood in the doorway, watching my parents fawn over their eldest daughter and her perfect little family, hanging on their every word, asking for details about the most mundane things. How their garden was doing, what new words Eisen had learned, how her book club was going. They'd never shown that kind of interest in my life, not even when I made the dean's list or won the business school's leadership award. Anna, be a dear and make some coffee, Mom called over her shoulder without even looking at me as she bounced Eisen on her knee. Standing in the kitchen that day, listening to the laughter of my family from the living room, I couldn't help but remember how things had always been this way. Jessica, 7 years my senior, had always been the star of our family show, while I was relegated to a supporting role. I remembered sitting at this same kitchen table when I was 11, showing Mom my report card filled with A's. She'd barely glanced at it before turning back to her conversation with Jessica about college applications. That's nice, Anna, she'd said distractedly, waving me away. Jessica, honey, what are your top choices for universities? Those years revolved around Jessica's high school achievements. Every dinner conversation centered on her grades, her extracurriculars, her college prep. I'd sit there silently, eating my peas, while Mom and Dad hung on Jessica's every word about her AP classes and campus visits. Things shifted even more drastically when Jessica got accepted to Brayton University. I was 11 at the time, and I still remember that dinner conversation like it was yesterday. We're so proud of you, honey, Mom had exclaimed, tears in her eyes. We'll figure it out, won't we, Robert? Dad nodded solemnly. We'll take out a student loan. Our Jessica deserves the best education possible. A week after Jessica left for college, I was sat down for a different kind of conversation. Anna, Dad said seriously, we need to tighten our belts for a while. Jessica's loan payments and college expenses are significant. That's when things really changed. While my classmates got new phones every year, I held on to my ancient flip phone until it literally fell apart. When I needed new clothes, we went to thrift stores instead of the mall. Christmas presents became practical items like socks and school supplies. But they never forgot to send Jessica money. Your sister needs to focus on her studies, Mom would say as she wrote out another check. We can't have her stressing about money. I learned my lesson early. By 15, I joined every club and academic competition I could find. I stayed up late studying, not just for good grades, but for perfect grades. I wrote essays for scholarship contests until my hands cramped because I knew there would be no student loans for me. Did it pay off? I got a full ride to State University, and I still remember the look of relief on my parents' faces when I told them they wouldn't have to spend a dime on my education. Meanwhile, Jessica graduated, got a job in Brayton, and promptly married David, her college sweetheart. Within 2 years, she had Olivia, and Eisen followed soon after. My parents were over the moon. Their perfect daughter had created a perfect family. Now, every monthly visit became the same routine. Jessica and David would show up with the kids, and before I could even properly say hello, Jessica was already mapping out her weekend. "Anna, you'll watch Olivia and Eisen while we go shopping, right?" she'd say, not really asking. David and I barely get any alone time these days. The first few times, I tried suggesting that maybe our parents could watch them instead. "Oh, honey," Mom would say, rubbing her back. "You know I have trouble keeping up with little ones, and your father needs his rest on the weekends." So there I was, spending another Saturday watching Frozen for the 100th time with Olivia while Eisen attempted to finger paint on my bedroom walls. Jessica and David would be out to lunch with friends, and our parents would potter around the garden, occasionally poking their heads in to ask if I needed anything, as if they were doing me a favor. I try to console myself with the thought that it was just 1 weekend a month, just one weekend being the reliable, free babysitter while everyone else lived their lives. A year passed in this monthly rhythm of babysitting and bill paying. I'd almost gotten used to it, almost. Then came the phone call that would throw my already complicated life completely off its axis. I was washing dishes after dinner when I heard Mom's phone ring from the kitchen. I could hear her gasp. "Jessica, oh honey, don't cry. Tell me what happened." Through sobs, Jessica explained that David's company had gone bankrupt without warning. They could no longer afford their rent, and they had no savings. Could we stay with you guys for a while?" Jessica's voice was so loud through the phone, I could hear her clearly. "Of course you can," Mom exclaimed without a moment's hesitation. "We'll make room." My stomach dropped. I stepped forward, clearing my throat. If the moving in, maybe this would be a good time for me to get my own apartment. You'd think I'd suggested setting the house on fire. Mom looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Anna, don't be ridiculous. There's plenty of room for everyone." "But we're family," Dad said firmly. "We stick together during hard times." They arrived the following weekend, 3 carloads of belongings in tow. I spent Saturday morning moving my things into what had been our storage room, the smallest bedroom in the house, barely big enough for a twin bed and a dresser. My old room, which was twice the size, became the kids' nursery because children need space to play. Olivia, now 5, and 3-year-old Eisen treated the entire house like their personal playground. They'd race down the halls, shrieking and giggling, while Jessica watched TV at full blast or had long, loud phone conversations with her friends about how difficult this transition was for her. "Olivia, Isen, quiet down," I'd yell when they'd burst into my room for the 10th time, scattering my work papers everywhere. "They're just playing, Anna," Jessica would say dismissively, not even looking up from her phone. "Don't be such a grump." After work, all I wanted was to relax in my room, maybe read a book or watch something on my laptop. Instead, I'd be treated to Baby Shark on repeat through the thin walls, punctuated by the constant thump, thump, thump of little feet running back and forth, and Jessica's loud laughter at whatever show she was watching downstairs. David spent his days supposedly job hunting, but most of the time I'd see him sitting at the kitchen table, staring worriedly at his phone. "The job market is tough right now," he'd say whenever anyone asked. "But I'm sure something will come up soon." I lay in my tiny bed every night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the chaos my home had become, and wondering how I'd let myself get trapped in this situation. But every time I thought about bringing it up again, about moving out, I'd remember my parents' reaction and bite my tongue. The first utility bill after Jessica's family moved and hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the numbers, which were nearly double what I'd been used to paying. The water bill alone had skyrocketed, not to mention the electricity and heating. Looking at my bank account, I realized my dreams of saving for my own place were evaporating fast. That night at dinner, I decided to bring it up. "So about the utility bills," I started, pushing my peas around my plate. "They've doubled since last month. I can't keep covering all the bills by myself anymore. It's taking almost my entire paycheck." Jessica's fork clattered against her plate. "Seriously? You're complaining about money right now, when David and I have lost everything." "I'm not complaining. I just think we need to figure out a fair way to..." I can't believe how selfish you're being. Jessica's voice rose. We're going through the hardest time of our lives, and all you care about is money. Jessica's right, Anna. Mom chimed in. Family helps family. That's what we do. Dad nodded solemnly. Your sister and David need our support right now. This isn't the time to be nickel and diming. I looked down at my plate, swallowing the words I really wanted to say. Fine. Never mind. A week later, David finally got a job at an insurance company. It paid less than his previous position, but at least it was something. I thought maybe things would start to get better. I was wrong. It's so hard being alone with the kids all day. Jessica started complaining almost immediately. David leaves at 8 and doesn't get back until 6. I never get a break. Then came the small requests at first. Anna, could you watch the kid for an hour while I run to the store? Anna, would you mind keeping an eye on them while I take a shower? Before I knew it, these small favors had morphed into something much bigger. I'd come home from work to find Jessica already dressed to go out. Oh, good, you're home, she'd say, grabbing her purse. David and I are going to dinner with friends. Olivia and Eisen already had a snack, but they'll need dinner in an hour. We'll be back by 10. Weekends became my personal hell. Jessica and David would casually announce their plans Friday night. A shopping trip, lunch with friends, a movie date, leaving me with the kids for hours. Mom and Dad conveniently started visiting relatives more often, usually disappearing right after Jessica and David took off. So there I was, weekend after weekend, trying to prevent Olivia from finger painting the walls while Eisen threw another tantrum because I cut his sandwich the wrong way. I'd spend my Saturdays cleaning up toys, making mac and cheese, and watching endless reruns of children's movies. By Sunday night, I'd be exhausted, my house a disaster, and I'd still have to cook dinner for everyone. One night, after a particularly grueling weekend of childcare, I finally mustered the courage to say something at dinner. I need to talk to you all, I said, setting down my fork. I'm really tired. This situation with the kids isn't working for me. Jessica's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. What do you mean it isn't working? Are you saying you don't want to spend time with your own niece and nephew? Mom reached over and patted Jessica's hand. Don't worry, honey. This is actually good practice for Anna. She'll need to know how to handle children when she becomes a mother someday. Think of it as training. And just like that, they were back to their usual dinner conversation. Jessica talking about her day, Mom, and Dad hanging on her every word, David nodding along. I sat there, invisible once again, pushing the food around on my plate. Nothing changed after that conversation. If anything, it got worse. Jessica and David seemed to take my complaint as a challenge, finding even more reasons to go out. They'd be waiting by the door when I got home from work, car keys in hand. We're going out to dinner with friends at that new restaurant downtown, they'd say, already halfway out the door. The kids already had a snack. Thanks, Anna. Weekends became something I dreaded. I'd wake up Saturday mornings with a knot in my stomach, knowing I'd be spending the next 2 days watching Paw Patrol and mediating sibling squabbles while Jessica and David lived their best lives. Then came a Wednesday that changed everything. I was at my desk at work, trying to focus on a marketing report despite my exhaustion, when my friend Rebecca stopped by my cubicle. Hey, want to do something fun this weekend? She asked, perching on the edge of my desk. A bunch of us are going to Pine Ridge Ski Resort. Just a quick weekend getaway. Leave Saturday morning, back Sunday night. The slopes are supposed to be perfect right now. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of excitement. Friday night, I was in my tiny room, packing my duffel bag, actually looking forward to an upcoming weekend for once. I just folded my warmest sweater when Jessica appeared in my doorway. What are you doing? She asked, eyeing my half-pack bag. Packing for a ski trip, I said, tucking in my thermal socks. I'm going to Pine Ridge with some friends from work. Jessica's face fell. You have to cancel. I looked up, surprised by her tone. What? Why would I do that? Because, she said, crossing her arms, David and I are going to Aunt Linda's 60th birthday party in Millbrook this weekend. Mom and Dad are going too. You need to stay here with Olivia and Eisen. I couldn't help it. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud at the sheer audacity of it all. Are you kidding me? I said, continuing to fold my ski pants. You can't seriously expect me to cancel my plans because you didn't bother to tell me about yours. Jessica's face flushed crimson. This isn't funny, Anna. You're being completely unreasonable. No, what's unreasonable is expecting me to drop everything last minute to be your personal babysitter again. Jessica's mouth opened and closed. She stood there for a moment, sputtering, before whirling around and storming out of my room. Mom, Dad, I could hear her yelling down the hall. You are not going to believe what Anna is doing. I continued packing, my hands shaking slightly with anger. The thud of footsteps heralded the arrival of the cavalry. My tiny room suddenly felt even smaller as Jessica, David, and my parents crowded in. Mom's face already wore that disappointed expression I knew all too well. "What's this about you going skiing?" she demanded, hands on her hips. "Exactly what it sounds like," I replied, zipping on my duffel bag. "I'm going to Pine Ridge with my friends for the weekend." "But you can't," Jessica cried. "We have Aunt Linda's party." "No, you have Aunt Linda's party," I corrected. I stopped what I was doing and turned to face them all. Why am I just hearing about this party now? Why wasn't I included in any of the planning? Mom faltered, looking uncomfortable for the first time. Jessica jumped in, her voice dripping with condescension. "We all discussed it and decided this would work best for everyone. We go to the party, you watch the kids. It's the most logical arrangement. You all discussed it," I repeated slowly, without me, and decided what I would be doing with my weekend. How convenient. "Well, you can't exactly take toddlers to a sophisticated party," Jessica huffed. "Aunt Linda specifically said no kids." I slung the duffel bag over my shoulder. "Sounds like your problem. They're your kids. Jessica, figure out. What's that supposed to mean?" David finally spoke, frowning. "It means exactly what it sounds like. I have plans. I'm going skiing. Your children are your responsibility, not mine. If you can't take them to the party, then either don't go or hire a babysitter." "A babysitter?" Jessica shrieked. "With what money?" Again, not my problem. I turned to face them all, suddenly feeling stronger than I had in months, maybe years. "Let me make this perfectly clear. I am going skiing tomorrow. I am done being your free, convenient babysitter. I am sick of having my weekends hijacked, my plans ignored, and my life treated like it doesn't matter. If you need childcare, Jessica, that is your responsibility as a parent. Stop assuming I will always be there to cover for your laziness." The silence that followed was deafening. They all stared at me like I'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Mom looked like she'd been slapped. Dad seemed to be trying to disappear into the doorframe. And David, well, David just stood there with that same bewildered expression he'd been wearing ever since his company went under. The moment of stunned silence didn't last long. Jessica's face crumpled, and she burst into theatrical sobs, covering her face with her hands. David muttered something that sounded distinctly like ungrateful under his breath. "How dare you?" Mom's voice rose. "After everything we've done for you, you're being completely irresponsible. Selfish," Dad chimed in, shaking his head. "Absolutely selfish." I stood there, duffel bag still slung over my shoulder, watching my family transform into a Greek chorus of accusations. The words washed over me. Selfish, ungrateful, inconsiderate, immature. Each one meant to wound deeply, to put me back in my place. Then Mom delivered what she clearly thought would be the knockout blow. "If you walk out that door tomorrow, don't bother coming back to this house." To everyone's surprise, I laughed. Not a nervous giggle, but a full, genuine laugh. They all stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "You know what's funny?" I said, wiping the tears from my eyes. "I've been dreaming of moving out of this house for months. I just didn't have the guts to do it. But here you are, giving me the perfect excuse. So thanks, Mom. Get out." Jessica shrieked, her fake sobs forgotten in her rage. "Just go." Gladly, I pulled out my phone and dialed Rebecca's number, putting it on speaker just to make my point. "Hey, Rebecca, sorry to call so late, but is that offer to stay at your place still open? Not just for after skiing, but maybe for a few days." Of course, Rebecca's cheerful voice filled the room. "I've got a spare bedroom. Want to come over now?" "That would be perfect. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I spent the next 15 minutes gathering everything I could fit in my car. Clothes, important documents, personal items. They watched from various doorways as I carried boxes up and down the stairs, like they couldn't quite believe I was actually doing it. When I'd loaded the last box, I walked into the living room where they'd all congregated. "Oh, one more thing," I said, my voice firm. "Since I won't be living here anymore, I also won't be paying any of the bills. You'll have to figure out how to support yourselves." Mom's face went pale. But the utilities, the food, not my problem anymore," I said, echoing my earlier words. I turned and walked out the front door, ignoring Mom's suddenly panicked calls behind me. The drive to Rebecca's was a blur of adrenaline and relief. My phone kept lighting up with calls and texts. Furious texts from Jessica, guilt-tripping novels from Mom, stern disappointment from Dad. I ignored them all. The next morning, Rebecca and I drove to Pine Ridge Ski Resort as planned. For the first time in what felt like forever, I spent a weekend doing exactly what I wanted to do. We skied, we laughed, we drank hot chocolate by the fire, and not once did I have to worry about anyone else's kids or problems. When we got back Sunday night, I opened my laptop and started searching for apartments. With my salary no longer going toward supporting my family, I could actually afford a decent place. By Wednesday, I found a small but bright one-bedroom apartment in a good part of town, just a 15-minute drive from my office. My first week in my new apartment was like learning to breathe again. Every morning I woke up to blessed silence. No screaming children, no blaring TV, no guilt-laden sighs from my mother. I could make coffee and drink it while it was still hot. I could spend my evenings reading or watching whatever I wanted on Netflix. The messages kept coming, though. I wasn't answering the calls, but I couldn't help but read the texts. They followed a predictable pattern. "Mom, how could you abandon your family like this? We need you. Jessica, you're so selfish. The kids keep asking, 'Where's Auntie?' Dad, your mother is very upset. You need to fix this." The messages swung between guilt trips and rage, accusations and pleas. I read them all, but I didn't reply to any of them. My silence seemed to make them even more frantic. They weren't used to not having power over me. After a week of this, I was sitting on my new couch when Mom's number flashed across my phone again. This time, I decided to answer. "Anna, finally." Mom's voice was sharp. "I can't believe you ruined our entire weekend. Aunt Linda's party was completely disrupted because of your selfish behavior. Jessica and David couldn't go because you refused to watch the kids, and I cut in, my voice calm but firm. "Just for the record, I'm done with this, Mom. I'm done being treated like a servant in my own home. I'm done being expected to sacrifice all my time, my money, my life, for everyone else's convenience. I'm done being the family ATM and the free babysitter while being treated like I don't matter." There was a long pause on the other end. When Mom spoke again, her voice had shifted to that pleading tone I knew all too well. "Honey, I know things haven't been perfect, but we're family. We need you. The bills this month, we're struggling without your help. No, Mom, I'm done. Maybe someday we can have a relationship again, but it will be on equal terms. No more manipulation, no more guilt trips, no more treating me like a walking wallet or a free daycare service. Until then, I need space to live my own life." I hung up immediately, blocked her number. Then I went through my phone and blocked them all. Mom, Dad, Jessica, even David. Blocked them on social media, too. It felt terrifying and liberating all at once, like cutting ties I hadn't even realized were binding me. Maybe someday I'll be ready to have my family back in my life. Maybe, with enough time and distance, we can build something new, something healthier with boundaries and respect. Or maybe not. Either way, I'm done sacrificing my own happiness and well-being to meet their endless demands.